Hey everybody, it's Mac and Greg from REV Robotics. It's another year, Kickoff is here. We're really excited to kind of talk through some of this game. Just to give you a kind of a level set here, we're going to talk a little bit about the game itself. We have some updates here from REV, and then we're going to break out to start building some stuff. So we have a whole weekend filled of fun-packed videos and adventures, so feel free to stop by our YouTube channel as we give updates throughout the rest of this weekend and going into early next week. So I'm going to throw it over to Greg because we have some other cool stuff.
So as Max said, this is our standard, kickoff concepts. So this weekend we're going to be doing a whole bunch of different things, post a bunch of videos, documentation to try to help make your kickoff maybe a little bit easier. We know that we're in kind of a weird world right now, and as such, we don't know that everyone has access to all their parts or all their kits, and so we hope that this video series and the things that we do this weekend kind of helps people jumpstart their season a little bit. So first thing I want to talk about a little bit is REV. So this year we everybody knows at this point, we introduced a new product called the Driver Hub. We're really excited about this. We think this will make the experience for teams getting up and running faster, easier. That's a really huge thing. They're available now through the storefront or on our website, but this will act as a replacement for your phone on the driver side. So now you can be Control Hub on your robot and Driver Hub on the driver side, and they talk directly. The next big one, which was talked about a little bit, is about app updating. So we launched the REV hardware client about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now. That is now the main place for all FTC teams, regardless of what devices you are using, to update and get the latest version of the FTC SDK. So if you're using the Control Hub, it'll update your Control Hub. Using Expansion Hub, it'll update your Expansion Hub. Driver Hub, it'll also update your phone. So if you're still using a phone on your robot or a phone on on the driver side, you can plug that into a computer, use the REV hardware client, and it will flash and update all the right firmware, software, API, and everything.
And just on that, just make sure to check our documentation for the process of using it with phones. There are a few developer settings and options that you need to have enabled on those devices to make them work natively. So you may have just some little changes that you need to do to get phones to work appropriately, but the Control Hub, Expansion Hub, and Driver Hub just connect right out of the box.
Yep. So the next thing I want to talk about and address is, we published a blog about this a couple weeks ago, but if you've been to our website recently, or maybe other websites kind of all around the world, you'll notice there's a lot of items out of stock. Due to the COVID pandemic, the supply chain, global supply chain has been really significantly interrupted. And that's everything from raw materials, costs going up, but also just availability. Specifically, electrical components have been a challenge for REV, and shipping lead times and prices and everything has gone up. It's a global problem that's not unique to REV, but for people who are participating in the First Tech Challenge, we know that you need your stuff as soon as you can possibly get it. Our staff here is working every single day on this problem. The good news is that FTC products, we're past the point where we've had challenges getting stuff, and now everything is en route. It's just going to take some time to get here. So we'll be updating our website with availability times as we know concrete times when stuff's going to arrive. We're going to be updating those available times. You can also always contact us and reach out to support if there's something specific, but we're working to try to get that stuff in stock as soon as we possibly can. The other thing that we also didn't talk about this year, normally we always have cool new products that we release prior to the FTC season. Similar with supply chain and everything, we designed some new products, but they're still a little bit delayed because of the same things that are keeping our existing products from being in stock. So a couple previews, and we'll post some product pages on that, but a couple really fun previews and things that we have going on. The first one is we released these compliant wheels a year ago with a 1/2-inch hex in them. We are now also going to be offering these compliant wheels with a 5mm hex in them. So you can directly interface to 1/2-inch hex or use ultra hex to convert, but now you'll be able to directly use a 5mm hex shaft with all our different varieties of compliant wheels and things like that. So that'll be really cool. The other thing that I'm really excited about here is this guy. So this is our Ultra 90-degree gearbox, and this is a 90-degree gearbox that's designed to bolt right on the face of the Ultra Planetary gearbox that's in all the starter kits. So in the past, you've been able to put a shaft in, change your gear ratios. Well, now you'll be able to install this right on the front face of the motor and give you a perpendicular output. This mounting pattern is actually the same as the core hex motor. So a lot of people who really like the core hex motor for its mounting conditions, you're now able to do that with the HD hex and that. As an example, this is our standard drivetrain configuration for like our starter kit. You can now see that that all fits tightly inside the rail. So building low profile drivetrains and stuff like that is going to really make it much easier for teams. So this will be available sometime in the next 4 weeks, we think. And we'll be posting more details and CAD and things like that on it on this coming week. But we wanted to tease it and share it with you guys now.
Well, one of the other things with the core hex motor is like the building methodology here at REV is being able to very, very quickly iterate and being able to kind of crank things up, so you can try having things that have like a 5mm hex shaft that you're able to turn either by hand or with a crank, and then really, really easily be able to drop this right onto the side, so you're able to kind of have the motor to some degree being an afterthought, or you're able to just continually swap and change and being able to iterate and see kind of what's going on there. As we're working on getting some battery charge for our little surfer.
Best laid plans here. Power dies as we're prepping for the stream. So the good news is that this weekend we've got a whole bunch of people from REV. We're all really committed to trying to make sure that kickoff and the season starts and everything goes really well and as smoothly as we possibly can. So we've got a whole crew in the background here behind the camera that are going to be helping us not just deal with tech issues like the fact that my tablet just died, but also things like helping to build robots and helping to really make this whole thing, a little bit more impactful. So I guess so Mac, kind of moving on, like Freight Frenzy, what do you think of the game?
Overall, like the game element, we kind of knew this a little bit earlier, right? First told us that it was going to be, we're going to be seeing the ball and the cube is going to be kind of coming back, and that the first thought that kind of hint there was, oh, we had Rover Ruckus, right? You could be able to build those types of intakes and maybe game handling things. So I think that's kind of a cool little twist. Having something actually that's physically on the field again for a year that is like a navigatable obstacle is also kind of a nice change of pace from having, I think the last 2 years have been a flat field.
Yeah, I mean we've seen a lot of flat fields recently, and so I think that having something where people have to make a core decision,
right.
It forces a drivetrain decision. I mean, I think that's the root of this is that the FTC meta for the last several seasons has been, hey, flat field, use Mecanum, right?
Right.
And I think that the really cool part about this is that, do we know if those Mecanum wheels are going to go over into those warehouses? In contrast to things like Rover Ruckus, as an example, Rover Ruckus, you didn't actually have to drive in to the craters to pick up the game objects. You have to be completely inside those warehouses to do that, and that's a huge departure. It's almost more like Skystone, in that you had to go all the way in to pick things up, or all the way to like the scoring side of the field. But this is kind of a new twist that I think is going to challenge people in regards to drivetrain and robot configuration specifically.
Yeah, and one of the big questions that we kind of have is like usually, I remember our conversation last year on the drivetrain. It was, you get a starter kit, you're likely going to be building our channel drivetrain. You may upgrade that to a Mecanum. There's no real losers here. You can pick one or the other. You're going to find success in last year's game. This year, I'm looking at those bumps, and it's like, well, can we actually get the channel drivetrain up and over? Are we going to have to make any modifications to that drivetrain to be able to do things there? So that's probably some stuff that we're going to look into. And then also, it's like, our Mecanum wheels are a little bit on the smaller side as well, so it's like, is there going to be any issues there with getting a Mecanum up and over?
So I think that this will be one of the first things that we test. Courtesy of the North Texas FTC, we were loaned a field right after their kickoff, so that gives us the opportunity to play this. Fortunately, one of the nice things about REV is that we actually have lots of robot chassis that are driving around ready to go, things that we use for our own testing and our own product development, but it's really easy for us to do that testing and to drive over and see what it looks like. And so throughout this weekend of Freight Frenzy, Kickoff Concepts, we're going to be doing that testing, posting those videos to YouTube, and then we're also going to be, following our social media and chats and things. So if you've got specific questions about the field, or maybe you don't have access to a field today, we're happy to kind of take a look at some of those things, and then we can kind of get through it.
Yeah. We're lucky enough we have a full field set up in our warehouse here, which kind of matches the theming a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we'll start.
Where else would it be?
Yeah, right. So we end up having it out back. So we'll be able to do some of those testings and be able to kind of get mechanisms and other things as we get far enough along onto a real field to see how they kind of interact and work. One of the other big things that was really noticeable with this year's game is that like these cubes, right? Like the weight difference between them is actually there is a decent weight difference between each one, depending on how many of these things are in there.
Let me clear a couple things.
We can clear some stuff out of the middle, but like there is actually a decent weight difference between them. So it's going to be interesting to see if, like, when we're designing intakes, right, like you kind of have these game objects that, relatively speaking, are all more or less similar sizes.
And we know, right, so like the good news about these game objects, the square and the ball, is that we've seen these two play together. Rover Ruckus did it, Rescue did it, the same game objects. So we know that intakes can be built that accommodate both of these, but this is just pure quackers.
Yeah. Well, and so between the actual ducts, and then also just making sure that the weight changes don't really negatively impact any of the kind of best laid plans that we have. I know like one of the really big things is, since all these game objects are relatively hard, except for the duck is kind of soft. But for the most part, you're probably going to want something that's relatively compliant. Some compliance on your intake, I would guess. The duck is very small as we're having fun playing with them, but so there are some things there. The other interesting thing is actually how these like shipping hubs kind of function. This thing is very big.
Jumping right in.
Yeah, jumping right in.
So I guess that's probably a good place to start, right? Is just kind of taking a look at some of the objects. So this is a new. It looks familiar, right? So this thing, obviously, it's got these big layers. The thing is actually relatively big compared. If you kind of take a look at our mat here, you can kind of see the general scale of it. But so the bottom of this thing is actually, it looks like one of the base goals from the wobble goals from last season, right? So it's like a wobble goal with an extra platform that's put on top of it, and then kind of built up from there. That might provide some teams some opportunities who are like in their shops but haven't gotten their field delivery done yet, to kind of get a feel for what this might look like if you took last year's goal and put a part on it. That might give you kind of some of that. So just a couple things. So it balances pretty easily when nothing's on it. It does return to center. Because there's so much mass outside, you can see there's like a lot of like it takes a while to settle. This is the heaviest cube, right? The one with 4 in it, right? Like when you drop it like that, it will tip. One of the things that I think that will be very interesting is how teams can place these in here, because if you're just gently placing it versus introducing dynamics to it, it really changes how steady state this is. So for the lighter objects, it obviously doesn't matter, but these heavier ones, just in our quick playing with it, dropping it,
especially on the lower levels, just like getting some force or dropping it in, or even just like having a robot action that is able to, like, if you accidentally hit this as you're kind of going around, it can make it become unbalanced. So it does seem to want to stay balanced, but it is kind of something just to keep in mind. And I believe with these goals, there is you need to keep these balanced.
Right. So I think what it is I think that and again, like, we're kind of we just downloaded the game manual as well. So we're reading through these and trying to do it. This is where I will always put my little asterisk here that says, please read the game rules for yourself. We're relying on the fact that we could read these quickly. We've been involved for so many seasons that, there's a lot of stuff that we can, oh, well, is that a rule? Is it not a rule? So make sure that you really read the rules and check out the Q&A if you've got questions. We will answer questions best we can, but we are not the authorities of the rules. So one of the things that I saw in my read-through was that I think there's a bonus.
Yeah, I think it's a bonus.
I think it's a bonus if this is balanced. I don't think this one has to be balanced. And then for the team neutral one, or the one that's divided red and blue that's in the warehouses, you want it tipped in your direction. So one of them you want balanced and the other one you want unbalanced. So
yeah, so it's going to likely change the way that dynamic is going to work on how you kind of are looking at designing mechanisms and maybe some of the kind of strategies as the game is developing that you're going to take place. The shared version of this is legitimately the bottom base is exactly the same. It's missing the other two layers of the cake, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. So what's the first thing, Mac, that we want to kind of take a look through? How do we want to do this?
So I think kind of the general idea is we should maybe get an idea of what actually we should start working on and building by taking a quick look overall at the field, maybe some of the scoring dynamics that could kind of lead us in a path of what really is important and what really isn't.
Yeah. So all right. So my general breakdown of the game, whenever I am mentoring a team or working with teams, the first place I always start is obviously make sure you understand how to do it, how the field is laid out. That's like number one. And then the second thing that I always look at is points, right? Obviously, like you are playing a game and this is a lot of fun, but also your goal is to try to do well at the competition. And so focusing on things that are not worth a lot of points doesn't seem like a great method for spending your time. As much like at this moment in time, and I haven't gone so deep into this, but like at this moment in time, like I love these ducks. These ducks are awesome. But is it worth going and building a robot that can just manipulate ducks? Well, I don't know yet, because we got to break down the game. We got to see how the ducks work here. So let's take a look at the field. Let's see if we can keep. There we go. Crow's nest. That was very difficult. I don't recommend using a duck for your team capper. All right, so let's take a look at this field here for a second. So as we were talking about at the beginning, so you have these two centralized goals. Are these anchored to the field, Mac?
No, they're not. They're completely free-floating. So they get more or less set in, like it's in the middle. It's in the middle of that tile line.
So that's really, I think that is actually really interesting here, because like they're not that heavy, right?
Right.
Like, so I think that one of the things, if we're taking notes on things that we want to try this weekend, is like, I want to see what it's like to push these around, because I think at first look, obviously, like, if you have to go all the way into the freight depot, right? I don't know if they can see my mouse. Oh, they can. So if you have to go all the way into the freight depot to pick up game objects, you want to minimize driving, right? So if you were to take this guy and move it, right, get it a little bit closer, maybe get it up against a wall so it's constantly balanced. Like, I don't know all the rules here, but like it feels like where these are on the field, if these can truly be pushed around, might be something we want to explore.
It might be something to look at. The other thing as well that's going to be useful is those barriers really are anchored onto the floor. And the first thing that actually really jumps out to me is the gap that you have in between both of the sides there on that barrier. It's like, is that something that is worthwhile in navigating? So let's talk about that for a quick second. So we've got this barrier on the field. The gap between the wall and the barrier is 13.5 inches.
Yeah.
Right.
So standard FTC robot maximum size is 18 by 18.
18 by 18.
So I guess the real question is going to be like, is it worth giving up 5 inches of width of your robot to not have to drive over a barrier?
Yeah, well, one of the other things that's kind of like the trade-off here is like typically in years, you want to make it, you don't want to make it smaller because you want to be able to carry as many game objects as you can. This year you're already limited to one.
Oh, that's right. I glossed over that earlier on.
Right.
It's a single game piece, so it doesn't matter which game piece it is, right? So whether it's the ball, or it's a duck, or it's the package right there. They're no longer cubes. They're packages. Amazon Prime. So regardless of which one of these it is, you can only carry one. And that changes everything, right?
Right.
So this game, at a very high level, it feels like this game is about efficiency, right? If you can only carry one object, it's going to be about fast maneuverable drivetrains, picking up things as fast as possible, and delivering them as fast as possible. So ultimately, the decision about going over the barrier versus going through the gap is going to be about how does that affect your speed, right? I guarantee you there are drivetrains that you put some big wheels on your robot. You drop the wheels down a little bit, maybe to give yourself some extra ground clearance, and you probably drive over the barrier without second thought. But you maybe lose a little bit of maneuverability if you do that. My immediate brain is going to what if you could build a really, really tiny 12 by 12 little base or something that you could just drive through it. Because if you could do something that was really, really small, you could still use Meccano, right? That's the only thing that you would have to drive over. So then it's still a flat field. So that's a pretty challenging. I really love this element of this game, right? It's no secret. I love games that force teams to make fundamental design decisions really early on in their process. Now with FTC, you can iterate that design and you can change things as you go, but you will have to decide early on as a team: am I going over that barrier or am I going through this gap? And there are pros and cons to each one of them. I think we absolutely have to spend time this weekend on that. What will it take to maybe what is it like? We have the standard drivetrain that the teams build with the REV starter kit. First of all, we need to see if that can go over the barrier as is.
Yep.
I have my doubts. But we should figure out, is there anything we can do to make it go over, and then how does that perform, right? And then what is the maneuverability and everything else associated with that? So this is like regardless of the rest of your robot, going over the barrier or going through that gap is going to be one of the first decisions that every team in FTC is going to have to decide. And
yeah, because it's going to impact what type of thing are you using to be able to get your game piece from the ground up, what type of how big your intake is. It's going to have an impact basically downstream on every packaging choice that you're going to make when it comes to at least the design side.
Yeah, it's such a huge decision. I mean, giving up it's only 5 inches in width, but in the context of FTC, I mean, a motor is in the 5-inch range. So
right.
So it's a big space, but the objects are small, right? So if you think about FTC robots having a gap where a lot of times it's drivetrain rails with then a gap in between them to pick up a game object, it's a pretty small game object, even when compared to the rings of last year. Right. This is a heck of a lot smaller, and you only need one. So that's going to be a tough challenge. I'm not actually sure, on the hot take of the game, if that's what the right call is there on how to on what to do. So let's talk about other elements of the field. So we've got these freight zones in the corners, right? And these freight zones look like they're mixed freight, right? So that is just the packages and the balls, right?
Right. So it seems very, very similar to the way that the crater was kind of set up.
Okay.
So you end up having this mix of different game objects that are in there. You're likely trying to go in to just grab a handful of them. So that's going to be something that we're going to need to keep in mind when designing intakes, is making sure that our intake is likely going to be able to grab any type of object once we get in there, but then make sure that we only grab one.
Yeah, that's going to be a thing.
Yeah, and then, I mean, at least the nice thing for this year's game is it doesn't seem like there really is, at first blush, any large advantage to sorting between different types.
Well, I mean, I see that, but I also disagree with that, because this weight is huge, right? So if you're trying to get those points for balancing this, right? So if you're trying to keep possession of the one that's either red or blues, the one that's the shared shipping hub, right? You're going to want to be able to sort, because maybe you want to put all the heavy ones on your side of your shared shipping hub to make sure that it's much harder for your opponent to overtake that. Whereas you maybe want to put all the light objects on your own, because then this naturally stays balanced. So I don't actually necessarily think that, I don't think that sorting game pieces, like picking up specific one or this other one, is like the end all be all, right? You can obviously score a heavy one and have it still balanced, but legitimately, you know, there might be some real strategy about, do I put the heavy ones where I want it to be tipped? Do I put the light ones where, even within your own structure here, right? You know, simple physics, everybody, right? Torque is equal to force times distance, right? So if you have a heavier one on the bottom that's got a greater distance to that pole, right? That's going to play a lot bigger of an impact than if it's placed really close to the pole. Now you have to figure out, you know, the top one all the way in here too, because you end up with distance from the pivot up there, but that's going to be really interesting. So like, it may not be that like you just go into the freight area, pick up any one, but maybe the driver has to decide, or the robot tells you where to put it based on which one it is. If it's a light ball, maybe you want to put all the light balls on the top, or all the ducks, you know, because they're going to have very little impact up top, and maybe you want to put all the heavy ones in close to the bottom to try to make this thing a heck of a lot more stable. So I think that there is some gameplay flow there. That might be crossing into more of like the advanced strategy stuff. Again, like, you know, going back to the purpose of Kickoff Concepts and the stuff that we do this weekend, we're not trying to design the perfect robot. We're not trying to tell you, like, build this robot, you're going to win at Worlds. That's not what we do. What we're trying to do is do a little bit of helping you guide along the exploratory piece of this game, and then hoping that mentors, coaches, and team members, you can use these videos as a jumping off point for the conversations that you have internally on your team, right? Every single team is going to have your own conversation about whether you're going to drive over the barrier or go through the gap, right? Mm-hmm. Every team is going to have their own conversation about whether you build an arm, an elevator, a conveyor, or whatever. We're going to do some evaluation to kind of maybe give you some data points that can help influence that decision, especially if you don't have your parts, your pieces. You might not even have access to your school. Those are the things that we're trying to do here. So maybe we steer a little bit away from some of those advanced strategy conversations about like, oh, well, the best place to put the heavy one is here based on physics, but and talk about the next part of the game. So let's talk about the ducks for a second, because the ducks have me a little bit baffled. I love them, right? They are the ducks earn these are the best cutest game pieces FTC's ever had. I don't think anybody's gonna argue with that.
I'm partial to the big foam cube, but anyway. Sorry.
So I mean, maybe it's like this and zipliners. Like, we should just be like rating games based on cute factor of game pieces. But it's pretty hard not to love a rubber duck. So anyway, so let's talk about the ducks. So what exactly? So the ducks come from these turntable things on the sides of the field, right? So these things over here in the corner. So. Right. The blue loading dock and the red loading dock, it looks like where the ducks start. And it looks like it's a spinning...
It's like a Lazy Susan. I think we have one of them around here somewhere. We can get our hands on it. Let's see here. Thank you, Lucas. So we got one of these guys
Clap
here.
for Bruce, everybody.
But it looks like you have the object kind of starts on here, and then you're able to kind of move this away, and then it will eventually deploy. Or did I?
I think you did that backwards.
I think I did that backwards. I did do that backwards. So then it eventually will.
Is this put together correct?
I might not have put this together correctly, but anyway.
Anyway, all right. So it's like one of those
Lazy Susan.
It's like a Lazy Susan, or it's like a thing that it's like one of those really interesting like arcade games where like you're trying to like put the little arm out to make it like divert itself off the field, right? Let's just pretend. All right. So basically, you can put one duck on at a time. And it looks like your human player, can your human player rotate this, or can only the robot do it?
From my quick look at the rules, it seems like it's only the robot is the one that is able to touch this. So the human player is the one that sets.
So the human player does that, and then you pretend like you're the robot.
And then the robot comes by and then says, okay, we're going to keep spinning this until this drops. So there might be some challenges on getting, like, we'll need to double check to make sure that this is all in correct spec, but it looks like the way that we have this set up, there it goes.
There you go.
Eventually it will get it to spin free. So you're going to need to have, there's going to need to be some sort of mechanism to do this, to then drop the duck. And then we also have some folks in the chat that have also mentioned this, but it looks like.
Oh, so this is the thing.
Oh,
the height is set wrong.
Okay.
So you put your duck on the outside.
There we go. That's why.
There. We have some very smart people in the room here assisting us here. So it works like that. So it means that you're going to end up needing some roller, some mechanism or something at a specific height to kind of do this. But then what happens with the ducks when they're on the field?
Once they hit the ground, then the robot's able to pick them up and score them.
Okay, but what are they?
They're freight. They're the exact same thing. It doesn't matter. They're the
so
same
the duck
thing.
so the duck counts for exactly the same thing as everything else.
Right.
So
It's just that it comes in at a different location.
All right, so let's finish out with the field here for a second. Is there anything else to point out in the field? You have these barcodes. This is very similar to what we've seen in previous years, in recent years, where a team, a randomizer happens. It gets placed on one of three spots. Teams use a camera, a color sensor, some type of sensor to detect, is there a duck there or not, and then they act upon it, right? So that's a pretty straightforward thing. I did like the change this year because in the past, like the last 2 years, you've been able to bring your own like capping thing, your own 3D printed thing. This is the first year you're able to use that as your vision marker.
Right.
That actually introduces a whole bunch of really interesting things. I think we haven't spent a lot of time on this in the past of Kickoff concepts, but maybe we take a look at some autonomous stuff if we have some time. But the cool part about making a custom vision marker is, first of all, because you have to pick it up and do something with it, you can design it to be picked up very easily with your robot. The other thing is that, identifying a duck with lighting and with everything else, at different environments, wherever your school is, things like that. Like the FTC SDK will ship with a pre-trained network to try to identify these with a camera, but you might be able to do something that's like, hey, the vision marker that your team brings is like super hot pink, or or the vision marker that your team brings is steel and you've got a magnet on it, and or it is magnetic. Like, I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities where it makes that challenge actually easier, right?
When you're using
when you've got your own thing that you're using, it's not, oh, well, how dirty is the cube or the ball, or ducks clean themselves, so you don't have to worry about that. But but basically, like, you can train exactly with the thing, and that's the practicing at home. So really, that's kind of a nice thing. So my first of all, challenge is every team is going to move in autonomous this year.
Right.
And every team is going to be able to regularly identify where their marker is.
Well, and with you mentioning that, I know that over the last couple of months, we've been spending a lot of time developing some of the programming resources that we have here at REV with our ClassBot. And honestly, if you probably put a different end effector on that, because we have a basic claw, you might actually be able to play this game to a degree. I'm not going to say you're going to win, you know, the world championship with one of our class bots. That's not really what it's designed to do, but as like a base level to get some learning. So maybe that's a good place where we can kind of start with exploring some of the things with autonomous, because I know we have like a half dozen of those somewhere in this building that we can end up pulling them out and they're already built, at least to get some of that basic pacing down.
Yeah.
And the other big thing is it looks like, at least for the delivery of these ducks, we were talking about the carousel.
Well, so let's so you're moved on to the scoring.
Yeah,
right?
I have some of the scoring here.
Let me bring up the scoring.
It should be, it's 4.7 is the section.
What's the page number?
Page number is going to be 28.
Almost there.
Almost there.
Watch Greg scroll a PDF.
Riveting.
All right.
So like the duck delivery portion only gives you points in autonomous. So maybe it does tip the scoring calculation, especially as you get to further on events, that it's worthwhile in doing this in autonomous. But it doesn't look like there's any additional points that you're getting from ducks other than introducing more game pieces to the field. So I think some of this is going to be a cost benefit of figuring out like if your team wants to go ahead and play on the carousel or not. I'm thinking on first blush from looking at from our type of stuff for this weekend, maybe we'll be able to get to it, but it doesn't, like, just kind of looking at the point scoring and how many game pieces there are and some other things, this might not be a high priority for us to try to tackle, but we'll see.
I mean, for me, it's a question of so looking at the field a little bit, and I've switched to a new piece of software here to play with. So looking at the field layout, your robot can start anywhere on the wall, right? Right? Is that anywhere on the wall that's not in the freight depot, right? So there's legitimately like a starting area. I'm gonna add a new layer here. All right, so there's legitimately a spot like right here where your robot can start, where like you could basically be like touching that and still kind of looking at like the three here.
Right. I'm going to double check on.
So it might be as easy as just like let's give myself another color here. Ooh, that was cool. About like if you had a red robot that started here, could you engage directly with the duck depot, do that real quick before you move, right? And that's like a static thing. Then identify which one of these things you're doing and then go score it.
Right, so the constraints that you have is for the starting location is they must be completely inside the playing field perimeter. Okay. Drive teams must place their robots in any orientation that has to be touching the playing field wall adjacent to their alliance station.
Okay, so that's this wall.
And you cannot start in the warehouse or in contact with a carousel or on a barrier. So it looks like you can get pretty close to that carousel.
So you can't start touching it.
But you can get pretty close.
But you can, I'm trying to get a color that we can like see here. It's very different. So you could start right here. That's not any better. So you can start really close to it, and then I'm just going to go black and see. Okay. So you can start really close to this, deploy a little thing quickly, touch that thing, and then go drive.
Right. So you could have a situation that's along those lines, especially if you're on that inner location. You'll also be able to maybe you can set yourself up for visual. Once it's touched the ground, it looks like that you can grab.
So once it's touched the ground, is that the rule?
Right. It needs the ducks need to be on the floor. So it seems like you can't
catch that duck.
You can't catch the duck. So at least on the first blush of like looking at it, you're not able to just like have like a little hand sitting there. But we'll need to read through these a little bit more in detail because legitimately we kind of power skim things.
Okay. All right. So we could try. Things to try. We can try a carousel spinner. Right. That's a pretty simple thing. You know, I'm just wondering if you could literally use like a servo on a stick, right? For lack of like a better way to do this, right? I mean, it's a fixed position. Your robot doesn't have to move that much. Could you just, is there some really, really simple, like here's a piece of extrusion, a servo, and a wheel at the right spot, and like the first thing, and maybe this is on a pivot, right? So like this thing goes like, it moves that way, like tips that way, right? Touches the carousel, right? And then like the little duck falls off without you basically moving the robot.
Right.
So that's a pretty interesting, like easy concept to try.
Yep. The other things that we probably want to be looking at is take a closer look at some of the general intakes that were used, especially within Rover Ruckus. So that's definitely going to be on our list. We already mentioned the drivetrains. That's on our list. Yeah. And then thinking we need to figure out how the heck we're going to move these game pieces from one location to another. So likely we're going to try building a couple variations, maybe on some arms, maybe an elevator. Yeah.
So okay. So let's back up for one quick second, right? So carousel delivering a duck. Actually, can I put both of these in the same view? That'd be so cool. No, I can't. I should have practiced with this software. So we know where robots start. We know where all that stuff is. So carousel delivering a duck, that's fine. Parking robot in a storage unit. Robots completely in the storage unit. Could you look up real quick what's the definition of completely parked? Because you've got completely parked in a storage unit, and then you've got in a warehouse, and then you've got completely in a warehouse. So I think it's important to kind of think through what those are. My first thought on that is obviously like how challenging is that going to be completely in something? But the other part is that, going back to that conversation we had at the very beginning of this about, do you build a small robot that can go through the gap? Can you get multiple robots completely in one of these zones?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm trying to look through to see here.
So you keep finding that. I'm going to keep going with points here. Let's see other stuff. So obviously parking with autonomous and FTC, that's a pretty standard one. So if you can drive, you can navigate, you know where you are on the field. Every motor has encoders. That's a pretty straightforward one. So there's some pretty good points here in autonomous mode. It's actually really interesting. This game kind of, so there's a lot of tasks for autonomous mode that don't seem like they stack, right? Because there's no bonus for scoring, there's no points scored on the carousel worth more in Auton, right? Obviously you get the bonus for putting the one on there in autonomous mode, but you don't actually, it's not like it doubles or does anything like that. So there's no besides getting ahead in the game, there's not a advantage to scoring 12 cubes in autonomous mode versus ticking off more of these tasks. So that's pretty interesting. I mean, looking at this autonomous, preload box completely on randomized level during the thing. So if you can pick out your item and put it on the exact level that you want, that's 20 points. You could deliver your duck. Doing this one and this one together is 30 points, which is probably pretty good. So you do those two and then you park, right? And if you could completely park in one of these things, a 40-point Auton seems pretty achievable. It's not simple, but even if you can't do the identification, even without doing any sort of vision or identification, you can still do this preload box completely on randomized level using duck, using shipping element. Okay, so there's some interesting ones. So actually, you see this, Mac? Reading comprehension is a thing. Do you notice that you actually get more points if you put your team's element on, as opposed to using the duck? Oh,
that's cool.
So legitimately, thinking about that for a second,
it behooves you to make your own.
The easier thing to do is to do your own team element, and you actually can get 10 more points for the exact same thing. So that's pretty big. So we need to think about team elements. That would be good. I wonder, we got to check the rules for team elements, but like, could you like take a duck and like just paint it orange or a slightly different color, or just like Sharpie some really fun hair on its head and then say that's my team element?
We'll have to take a look. Maybe you just get a really big duck.
Yeah, big ducks. I don't know. I think there's normally size constraints for the team elements, but
right. Well, and then the other thing as well though is that it's kind of this trade-off, right? So it says preload box completely on randomized level using a team shipping element. Oh, so it's like that's if you sense your own element and then place that element.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that they have the three little dots.
Right. So getting a big duck or something.
I'm just saying, like, you might as well make your own and take the risk, right? Because if you're going to accomplishly put a duck out there, you might as well try to put your own item out there. My question is that, like, they make and sell like rubber duckies that are like dressed in all sorts of different themes and different colors and things like that. Like, I wonder if you're allowed to use like.
You get one that's on brand.
Yeah, you get a team branded rubber ducky.
Right. So that's another thing that we can kind of take a look at and do a little bit of a deeper dive on. The other big things that like I'm kind of sitting here. It's like mainly it seems like there's three major mechanisms for this game.
Sorry, I can't help myself. The rubber ducks, they're fun to play with. Like this is what's going to happen at your team.
Yeah. Well, yes.
I'm calling it here first though. Like so, I would like to see a duck stacking competition that teams do. Maybe we'll come up with like a fun social media contest, but like. Just in sitting here, like I've been very successful at giving a duck hat, but I would like to see how good teams can do. So
yeah,
we can have some fun with that.
Yeah, that too, and we'll see how late we're actually here tonight and also tomorrow, and potentially this is going to be coming out.
Document your duck stack,
basically, and then. But the more or less this game really seems like it boils down to like 3 or 4 mechanisms, and we actually need to get kind of cooking if we want to end up getting all this stuff this weekend.
So I mean, ultimately, like going back to the point scoring here for a second to kind of wrap up some of this, I think what we'll do is maybe when I'm less distracted by ducks, we'll make a more concise scoring breakdown video. But like, so that's autonomous. During driver controlled. Pretty straightforward scoring. Objects on pieces, where they go affects the points. There's a pretty big, 6 points versus 2 points depending on which level of this you're on. So that definitely plays in. This is obviously a cycling game, right? I think that's fundamentally after autonomous, it's a cycling game. Go here, drive here, pick up this thing, move it here. And with cycling games, the goal is every single cycle, you want to maximize your points in that cycle. So prioritization of get the closest object to you, drive the least amount of distance, put it in the place that scores you the most points. I mean, that's generally how cycling games go. But the fun part here is that like it doesn't actually seem like going in the low is going to be that challenging for a lot of teams. So there's some interesting options here, I think, for every type of team. And then last, we talk about the end game here. That last 30 seconds of the match, obviously delivering. So that's using the carousel again at the end. You get points just for bringing it onto the field, right? So you get points at the very beginning of the match in autonomous for bringing them in, and then you get them at the end. So if you can do it in autonomous, you can do it at the end. It's that same mechanism. Anytime you can reuse the same mechanism to get more points, that's always a really good thing. Alliance shipping hub is balanced. So that's your team's shipping hub, balanced. And my thought here, just playing with this for like 10 minutes before we went live, is that I think balanced is something that you're going to have to think through during the match, right? I think that if you load this thing up to the point that it is unbalanced, I think the likelihood is during the end game, you trying to come and manipulate this back, or like trying to like get something in here to push these things around to then be able to get it back balanced, it's going to be pretty tough. So I think that if balancing is part of your team's strategy, you're probably going to want to be considerate of it being balanced the entire time. Or when there's fewer objects on it, making sure to do it. One of my questions was like, we have to look at the definition of balanced, because like, could you push this thing up against a wall?
Yeah, or are you able to even move them at all?
There's some things here that need to get defined.
Yeah,
we'll spend some more time reading the rules this weekend, as everybody else should as well. And then lastly, you still have the warehouse and parking completely in or out. Did you ever find the rules on completely?
There isn't a definition for completely parking. There is for parked, and there's also for supported, but from kind of, this is more reading in, as it seems like you have to be completely in the tape line. So like if you have an arm on your robot, can your arm be overhanging if your drivetrain is all the way in, or is it like a vertical projection of that zone? It sounds like it's going to be a vertical projection of the of the whole thing.
All right, so this is asterisk again. Don't take our word for it. Read the rules.
Right, and I'm going to continue to do a little bit of searching, but I wasn't able to find anything.
We'll post. We'll do that. And then the last one is capping each team shipping element, 15 points. So this is a really interesting one. So capping, just like capping the Skystone, would be like placing your element on the top, like boop. So that's a really interesting one because you get 20 points for scoring your team element in autonomous on a specific level, which means that to get these points, you either need to not get those autonomous points, or you need to be able to get your team element back out of the goal to then put it on top.
No, it's the preloaded box is the one.
Oh, preload. Well, but it's preload box completely on randomized level using team shipping element.
Right. It's just using the shipping element as the identifier instead of the duck.
Right, but
so you don't need to score your element, and you don't need to score.
No, but it's so Autobone is preload completely on randomized level using shipping element. So that is you scoring your team load box. Right, but
but you don't need to score your element. You just need to carry it into the end stack. That's basically how that is working. It's just for the identification purposes. It's worded a little confusingly, but that's what they're intending.
So how is it completely on a randomized level if it's not scored?
Because the duck in the beginning of the game is on a different barcode. So that's the randomization.
Right.
It's the same thing as last year. 0, 1, or 3. Right?
I get that, and I want to but it's like if this wheel was your randomized level, and then you read the little code on the floor. And that code was, okay, put it on the top, right? To get these 20 points, you need to put this on the top.
No. You need to put your Xbox on the top. Not your Microsoft Xbox, the box that has
Oh, okay. So
I was reading it the same way.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're just using that as a fiduciary on the field.
Correct.
And that is what determines to put the box, the little one that's got X in the right spot. So then this end capping thing would be, this guy is on the floor.
Yeah, it's
somewhere.
on the floor, or you're carrying it potentially.
But
that's another thing to check.
So this one. So the question is, can you carry your team capper and a game object, or does this only count as one?
Right. I was not reading it that quickly. I know that it is for the delivery constraints, as it's one duck or your team element. I would.
Okay. So that's something we're gonna have to do some rule reading on. Sorry for the confusion. We need to, but I think it's really important. The takeaway here is that like collectively in this room, for the folks that you guys haven't seen behind the camera, like there's probably like 20, 40, there's like 60 years of first experience in this room right now, and we read this and had two different interpretations. So make sure your team spends time reading the rules, going through it, have these little debates internally. Go on the Q&A system, ask those questions, right? Yes, you can go on the Discords and other forums and things, but make sure that we get an official ruling for this stuff so that you don't build something, make an assumption, and then go go a different way. So I think kind of that's as far as we should probably take this game wrap up or this very beginning of this. We have a lot of work to do. I mean, there's intake prototypes to build, there's drivetrain, there's, I don't know if we're going to go elevator, conveyor, arm, do all three. We want to do some autonomous stuff. So anyway, we're going to be here at REV through the weekend. We're not going to be doing live streaming. We find that building stuff is much easier when there's not a camera on you. And honestly, it's easier for us to come in and say, let's build something, let's come back, let's shoot a small little segment on the thing we built, let's demo it, and then we can put those videos out more efficiently and quickly. Before we kind of wrap up, are there any questions from the chat that we want to address? Because I know there's been some really great conversation since we've been streaming.
There's some questions about the weight changes that are in the some of these are in the manual for approximates, but for the individual game elements, so we can definitely do a little bit of a closer look on these to be able to kind of see what's kind of going on there. We can get those together. There's a number of these that look like they're all more or less rule related. There is a question about using TensorFlow potentially for determining the differences between the game pieces, and yeah, that might be something that is useful, especially if you're already going to be putting a camera on your robot. With the control hub, that's really straightforward and easy to do. You just plug in the USB connection and call in the right APIs.
Yep.
So that may be something that's worthwhile. But basically what we're going to do is we need to get to work.
Yep.
And we'll be checking back in with you guys throughout the day today and also tomorrow with some update videos. Feel free to like and subscribe our YouTube page so you can
get updates.
Stay updated when we're posting stuff, because it's going to be happening pretty rapidly.
Yeah, throughout the weekend, we're going to be posting updates as soon as we go. And then you can also check out our other social media, our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're going to be posting maybe even little like small teaser photos and stuff like that in between when we release videos to those social channels. So I guess that's a great way to spend the first hour of the season. We're really excited for Freight Frenzy and really excited to see what you're going to do. We're not out of the woods yet in regards to COVID and the different ways that different teams are going to experience their seasons. And so we wish you all the best of luck in designing and building your robot. But most importantly, please stay safe and do things following local guidance. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you at an event this season. But either way, we know it's going to be terrific to see what you guys build throughout Freight Frenzy.
Yep. So we'll be checking in with you guys, and we'll see you all soon.
See ya.